Everybody checking in for this week's lesson in the Topical class. My name is Andrew Barker, and I'm bringing the lesson to you this week. Today, we're going to be going through Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 through 16. We've been studying the Sermon on the Mount, and last week just completed a study on the Beatitudes. But this week, we're going to be in Matthew 5, verses 13 through 16. I'm going to read that out loud through the NIV for anybody who doesn't have a Bible right there with them. If you want to look this up and read along, you can pause the video and join me as soon as you found it. Matthew 5, 13 through 16. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. I think it's interesting that the first two words in verses 13 and in verse 14 are the words, you are. He doesn't say, you should be. He doesn't say, you could be if you worked really hard. He doesn't say, after you get a little bit better at being a Christian, you will be. No, he says, you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. Jesus is giving us an identity about who we are in his kingdom and in the world that we are currently living in. He's telling us exactly who he created us to be, who the Almighty made us to be. I think it's so easy in our day-to-day lives to get bogged down with all the things that we don't like about ourselves, the things that we don't think we're well equipped for. And those fears or those, you could even call them lies that we tell ourselves, sometimes they prevent us from being the salt of the earth and being the light of the world. Today, I want you to really remember this. God has created you. God has made you salt and light. It doesn't matter what you think of yourself. God has told you exactly who you are and what your identity is. And we serve a very faithful God who's going to make sure that when we need to be salt, we are equipped for that through the Holy Spirit. When we need to be light, we're going to be equipped because God is with us as we're trying to be salt and light. Almost every lesson that I've heard on salt and light starts with a big list of all the things that salt and light are used for or qualities that they possess. And then we normally tease out some of the parallels. And briefly, salt was used for seasoning back then, just as it is now. It was used as a preservative because it's not like they had refrigerators and electricity to use. And so they used it for preservative functions. It was also used as a currency because Roman soldiers would even get paid in salt. And that's why the phrase, someone who is worth their salt, that's what it means. Someone who is doing enough work to actually earn their wage. Light is useful for a bunch of things. It helps us see. It helps eliminate fear of the unknown. It allows growth. I mean, plants need light to grow, right? When you look around at the world and you see that the world is looking very dim and hopeless, and there's a lot of lost people out there, I mean, I think it's one sign that we're not doing enough to be salt and light to the communities around us. And I think when we look at ourselves, when we look at our hearts and the things that limit us, um, it's one of two things. It's either that the world is just overwhelming us and we're not able to do it alone, or it's that we become so much like the world that we aren't really making a difference anymore. And I think that's a question that we all probably need to just ponder for a moment. What ways are both of those things potentially true in my life, and how can I fix that? Um, if you feel like you're not the salt of the earth because you're too much like the earth, work on your heart, get into some spiritual discipline so that you can go out there and be the force that God created you to be. One of the the books that I've been reading as I've been preparing to teach in this series has been by an author named Randy Harris, who I don't know if he still is, but he was on faculty at Abilene Christian. And one of the things that he comments on is that on occasion he's seen Christians or maybe large groups of Christians that when the world gets challenging, rather than going out and engaging with the world and being the salt and light, sometimes we have a tendency to sort of just look inwards. We try to separate ourselves from the bad stuff going on in the world, and we try to take solace and comfort in the company and companionship of the Christians around us. And he very gently but appropriately reminds us that when we're feeling the world get worn down, the world needs us more than ever. It's not wrong to look to the needs of the people within our church community, obviously. I mean, we are called to serve one another as well. But we can't forget that one of our principal functions as a Christian is to be the salt and light of the world. I think this week, as you go out and live your life, I want you to think about how desperate the world is today, right now, for salt and for light. They need the light of Jesus in their lives. And you are equipped. Jesus told you at the beginning, you are the salt, you are the light. It's really just a matter of obedience and letting the Lord work through you. That can be a really scary thought, but I do believe that the more often we put ourselves out there and the more frequently we go through that process, the less uncomfortable it becomes. And we've got it in us. God created us to be able to go out and make a difference. I hope that this week you have an opportunity to make a difference in someone else. You may not see the fruits of that labor right now, but our job, as one of our classmates commented today, our job is not to judge the soil before we throw the seed. Our job is to put the seed out there and let the master do his work. Don't underestimate the power of the Almighty to take your humble gifts and really change a life. Maybe for a day, maybe for eternity. We don't know. The blessing is we get to be a part of it. We get to be a part of God's work. And if you aren't doing it, boy, are you missing out, because he's going to teach you something. He's going to show you something about who he is that's going to be beautiful, and it's going to transform you, and it's going to be incredible. So this week, think about it. I know you've been praying for your one. Our whole church has. Man, you're going to come into contact with so many people who need physical needs met, who need emotional needs met. Whatever it is, be the salt, be the light. You are the salt and light. Have a blessed week. Make a difference in your world today.